Hello friends and welcome to the next part of Next.js 13 series. Now as we are done with the UI of this blog, let's go ahead and get started with the API for this blog. Now to design the API or create the API, first of all we need a database. So as database, I'm going to use for this project SQLite because SQLite is easy to set up and also lots of you are already familiar with SQLite or MySQL. So everything will be very easy for you to pick up. But even if you are not familiar with SQLite or MySQL, don't worry about this. I'll explain everything in detail. So let's go ahead and get started. Now for this, first of all, inside our root directory or main directory, we will create another folder and I'll call this just database, like that. And inside this database folder, first of all, we need our schema. So for schema, we need our migration. So let's name our first migration here. So it will be 001 and I'll call this blog posts. You can call this anything you want, .sql. Now inside this migration, we are going to create our schema. If you don't know what a schema is, so a schema is a database structure that represents the logical storage of the data in the database. So it means it represents the tables of the database with its data columns, relationships, and data types. But no data is stored in a schema, so it's just the skeletal structure of a database. So let me show you everything in action so you'll understand everything better. Now for this, we have our migration. So here we will create our table. So first of all, for this blog, I need a category table. So for that, we have to create that table by using the SQL commands. So for this, I'll say create. So just as normally we create a table. So I'll say create table and I'll say if not exists. So if not exists, which means if there is no table with the same name in this database, then go ahead and create that table for me. So here I'll call this category. Now if it doesn't find any category table, it's just gonna create a new table for us. And then inside this parenthesis, we define which columns we need for this specific table. So first of all, for example, as always, we need the category ID. So I'll just type cat ID. You can call this just ID. It doesn't matter. But to make everything clear, I'll just type this as cat ID. And then you have to write the data type, which is in this case integer. And then I'll say it's a primary key. So then later on we can use this primary key as foreign key in our post table so we can make the relationship between these two tables. And then I'll say this field should be also auto increment. So the database will increment by 1 anytime we create a new category. So that way we don't need to care about that. And then I'll say it should be of course unique. So after this we put a comma and then we define our next column in that table. So now I'll say here it should be like category underscore name. So I need a category name. You can call this also just a title. It just depends to you. Now as it's a text, so the data type will be also text. And here I'll say not null because a category without name doesn't make any sense in our table. So, and this also should be unique because two same categories with the same name will create also problem for us. And then the last one here, I'll say created at, so to get the date. So the data type of this will be, as its name says, it will be just a date. And now for this field, I'll give a default value. So here I'll say default and then inside this default you can type a specific date or you can use a function which is called date and time. So date time, and then inside this you will type now, so it should take the current time, and then which time should it take? I'll say here just the local time of our machine. So it will just go ahead and take the local time of that server in which our program is running. With that, we are finished with our first table. So for the next table, we need just the same commands here, but with a different name. So create table if not exist, and then we call this post, or you can call this posts, whatever you like. So here I'll create that table, and inside this also we need some column. So now instead of typing everything one by one, let me paste my code here and I'll explain everything, so that way we can save a little bit of time here. So the first thing, as here I have created a post ID, it's also an integer, it should be a primary key and auto increment. You can of course make this unique, but as it is just auto increment, so that way it will be always unique. And then we need the title for our post, so this will be text and this shouldn't be null. And then we got our slag, the data type of this will be also text and it's also null, but it should be unique. Remember to put this unique, because if we get two same slugs, then it will be difficult to fetch the data by using its slug. Now if you're not familiar what a slug is, it's just the title of our post with some hyphen in it. Let me show you the example. So as we got this title here, now if I click on it, it will go ahead and opens the details page for me. Now here if you see, we don't have the ID of 1, 2, 3, but instead of that we got all the title and we got some hyphens inside it. So the hyphen ultimate and hyphen Next.js 13 course. So like that we will create this with function, so don't worry, you don't need to do this manually, but this way it's better, because if we share this link, they will already understand what they will read if they open that post. So now let's go back and see what else we got. So here we got our image URL field. Now I call this image URL, you can just call this image, but as I'm using image URLs from a domain, so that's why I call this just image URL. The data type of this, text, not null, and we get a default image which will be this one. It's just an image from Pixabay, so if a user forget to give us any kind of image, then it will take just this image for us. And then we got our excerpt. Now excerpt is, if we go back here, as you see here, we got a little definition here for this post, or for each post here. So that's what we called excerpt. We need excerpt, and then we got our content, which is the description of that post, and also our author, which is author name, and then we will use the featured. Now remember, the featured will be also an integer and it will be not null, but the default of this will be 0. So later on, if we want to make any featured post here, we will click on it and we will make it 1. So if it is 1, it will appear here inside this list. If it's not, it will just go ahead here or inside the all posts page, like that. And then after this, we get the same way from here, just we get a created at. And now to create a relationship between these two tables, we need also a foreign key here. So before foreign key, we need one field of that from here. So for that, here I'll be just using this category name. So let's copy this one and paste it here. But we don't need this not null and unique here. Here we just need this name, because we are going to use this as foreign key for our post table. So that way we can fetch the data, or we can fetch the post using its category name. So here I'll say now foreign. So it's important to type this. It's foreign, and then we call this key. So it will be our foreign key, and here we will define which field name we use as foreign key. Now, as I said, we will be using one of them, so we are using the category name. So let's go ahead and use this one just here. And here, remember, lots of people also use the category ID, but I want to do this like that because if later on if we fetch the data, so we can see the name, and I think it's better than using the ID of 1, 2, 3. But it depends to you. You can use it anyhow you want. So after foreign key, then we need to reference this. So we say references. So references, so a difficult name here, references, and what it references, it references to our category table. So we need the table name here. So like that, and inside the table name, I'll be using just the same way which field we need. We need the category name field from here. So which means we are referencing this foreign key to this table of category, and also from there we are using this category name field like that. And then I'll just say here, so on and delete, so it should cascade. Now what it means, so here I mean if the category is deleted, then it should delete all its posts also, because that way if we got any post here with the name of that category, and if our query doesn't find that category, then we will get an unexpected error. So that's why it's better to use this on delete cascade. So after that I'll say on update. So if there's any update, don't take any action. So there will be no action like that. Now as you see, we are representing, or we are showing how our tables will look inside our database. Now that's all what we called an schema. So with that being said, let's go ahead and create the setup for our database. So here inside the database, we'll create one more file, and I'll call this setup. So setup database.js, like that. You can call this anything you want, so it doesn't matter, but later on we need this name, so remember to use a name which really explains what it does. So here we have to save this, of course, and then to create that database, of course, we need the SQLite. So let's see how to install SQLite. So here you can type SQLite React, so like this, and then we will get all the information from different pages, so you can find it out here, but we can say npm, so that we will get the installation. So it's just easy. You will go to npm.js.com, and from here you will get install SQLite 3 and install SQLite. We need both of them. So npm install SQLite 3 save. So we'll copy this command and go to the terminal. Now here we will just paste that just like this, and then we press the enter. It will install this one, and also we need to install the SQLite. So let's click on this, and here it says npm install SQLite save. If you need any other version, you can just put this @ sign and use that version. I'll be using the new version, which is the 4. So let's go ahead and install that also. So I'll paste it here and just save it. Now it's running, so let's run our server, and then let's go back and start coding. Now here we need the SQLite. So normally what we do is we just import, for example, SQLite from SQLite. But to use the SQLite, we don't do this like that. We just type here const, and we give it a name. So here I'll say as the name is, so it will be SQLite is equal to, and then we require that. So we require what are we requiring, and here you can type SQLite 3 or SQLite. So we need the SQLite 3, and then we need the same way SQLite also. So I'll explain you in a minute why do we need both of them, but for now let's go ahead and create our function. Now to create that database we need an async function. So here I'll type async, and then it will be what? A function. So function like that, and you can call this anything you want. I'll call this just open database, so it will open the database for us like that, and it will also create that database, but it doesn't matter. So here I'll say return, and then we need to use one of these SQLite 3 or SQLite. So here let me rename this to SQLite, because here we'll be using first of all SQLite dot, and then you get all the options available for that. Now we use our curly braces. Inside these curly braces, then we define the file name or the database name which we want to open. So actually it means here we are creating a new database, okay? And here we have to define where we want to store that database or save that new database. So here I'll say dot backslash, and I'll give it a name. So this name, anything you give, it will be your database name. So here, for example, I'll call this blogdb. You can call this anything you want, blogdb.db. So it will be a database. So I'll just call this blogdb, or we can just call this blog.db. So it just clears the name here. And then we need one driver, and that's the point where we need the SQLite 3, because if you work with SQLite you will get some errors. So that's why I'm going to use for the driver of that the SQLite 3. So here we will say SQLite 3 like that, and then we need dot, and then you can use this database. So all this function will do for us is going to create this database for us, okay? And also with the help of that function we can open that database. With that being said, now let's go ahead and create the setup or a new function which will just run these migrations or this schema to create our tables inside that database. So for this I'll create one new function, and this will be also async, and I'll call this function. So in the name of that I'll just say it is setup. You can call this anything you want. So here setup, and inside this we need our async function, so the OpenDB, to run all these scripts here. So for that I'll just say here const, and then I'll give it a name. So for now we call this it's the database, and it should be await because our function is async. So always remember to use the await before using that anywhere. So here I'll say it's called OpenDB like that. It's just a function, and then what this OpenDB or this new DB should do for us. First of all, here we'll say await because this function is also async. So, and here then we can say db dot. Now here you get more options what you can do with this database. For us, we want to run our migrations, so that's why we'll be using this migrate function. Now inside this we have to define some properties. So the first one here will be just our migrations path, so what we want to migrate. So as you see we got this already. So migrations path, and here we have to define where this file is stored. So here I'll say it is just in backslash, and then here I'll just type the force also. That's the force will be just lost, like that. So now let's run some SQL statements also here to see the result in the terminal. So that way we understand if there's any error or if everything is working for us. So for that, I'll just go ahead in here. I'll say const category. So we'll be using await because we are going to use our this db function here. So it is db.all, and then we can run our SQL statement here. So as usual, select all from where? From our category table. So like that. And the same way we need this also for post. So let's use this here. We call this post, and here also select all from post. And now to show everything in the terminal, we'll be using console.log. So console.log, and here we gave it a name first of all. So here I'll say all category, like this. And then we need to use the JSON, so we need to convert them in a string. So JSON.stringify, and then we'll be using what we want to stringify. So here we got our const table of category and post. So let's copy this category here first, and then we'll say null is true and also 2, like that. And then we copy this one for post also. So we can just change the name, so all posts, and then it will be post. So null 2, everything is the same, and we'll save it. After that, at the end, we run this setup function. So we have to run this setup function and save it. Now, as everything is done, so let's go ahead and run this file. Now to run this file, we need Node.js. So I'll cancel the server, and now here I'll type node, and we need to specify the path or this file to Node.js. For this, as it is inside the database folder, so I type here database, like that, and then inside that database it should search for setup database.js, and as we press enter, it will run that database for us. Now it is run, and let's see if we got any problem. Now as you see, we get some SQLite error. So let's see what's wrong. And now here is everything. Okay, it says near create syntax error. So let's create table. There is nothing here. Okay, here I have forgot to put the semicolon, because if you don't put this, the SQL script will continue running, and that's why as it comes to create, it says there's a syntax error because it can't run both of them together. So that's why let's save this and see if everything is working now. But before running that, as you see, we got a database created for us. Now we need to delete that database because it's possible that inside this blockdb it has already created the category table, and we may get some more problems. So that's why it's better to delete this. Now let's delete this and rerun everything. Now here again I'll say node database setup database.js, and as you see, we got the result. So we get 2 empty array because our tables are empty now. We have no data there, but it means that everything is working. So we got our database also here. So let's check out if there's something inside this database. So for that, we'll go to browser. So here we will search for SQLite viewer. So just SQLite viewer, and then we go to this SQLite-viewer.app website, and here now we say open file, and now here I am inside my project. So this gets nodes clone, and inside that I got that blog.db. Now I'll just open that. Now as you see, we got our categories table and also post table. Now here inside this, the columns are just same as we gave. it is cat ID, category name, and created at. So if we go to VS Code, now you can see we got this column of cat ID, category name, and created at. And also the same thing is for our post table. You see we got post ID, title, slug, image URL, and all the columns which we have defined. And also our relationship is here. It's also a foreign key. So everything is done for us, which means we are ready now to design our API for this blog. So for this, I'll come back to VS Code, and here I'll close everything and I minimize this terminal also. So I'll just use it like that so we can see everything. And now here we need one more important folder from Next.js, which is these pages. Now inside these pages, we define every route of our website. Now here we got one more important folder, which is called API. So as the name says, here we define all our API files, or we create our API. Now here as example, there is one hello.js file. So it just returns a name of John Doe. So let's see how to get to that. For this, we have to run our server. So here I'll say npm run dev. So like that, and enter. Now it is in localhost 300. So let's open this. Now here we go. We got our website running, and here we can define our route. So the first folder was API, and after that we got something which is called hello. So let's type hello, and as you see we got this JSON file which says John Doe. Now let's make some changes here. So here I'll say codings Doe, like that. Save it, and then if we go back and refresh this, as you see we got codings Doe here, which means we are targeting the right file in the right folder. But now inside this API folder, let's create our own API for this blog. For this, we can just define everything here just like this hello.js, but as we got two tables, so let's make everything more readable. For this, I'll create one new folder and call this category. So here you don't need to put any JS or etc. It just works like that. And then we need another folder and we call this posts, or just post, like that. So here inside this category folder, we can create our new file like this hello.js. We can, for example, use category.js and show our categories. But this will make our API route a little bit longer. So let's see what I mean by that. For example, I'll just use this hello.js from here. I'll just copy this one and paste it inside my categories folder. Now let's rename this, and here I'll say it is my category.js. So now let's say here also category though, so like that, and save it. And if we go back to browser, and here if I type category, so it's our folder name, and now I type the file name here, which is also category, so like that. And now if I press the enter, as you see we get that API. But here it's not looking good because we are using API, then category, and then again category. It will be better if we just type category and access to our API link. But for now we get 404 because Next.js doesn't know about this kind of route. So how to solve this problem? Now what we can do is, instead of this category.js, we can just rename it to index.js. Now this way the Next.js will run this index file as we type the folder name. So let's see if it works. Now here it's already updated, but as you see it is here API and category, and we don't need to specify the file name of index here also. You see it doesn't find any kind of index.js here because Next.js is just designed like this. So if you want to create any root folder, you can just type index.js. With that being said, Now let's go ahead and work with our index.js file. Now here I want to fetch all the data from this table of category inside our database. Now let's see how to do this. Now for this, first of all, we need our database opener. So we need this function again, which was inside our database, and we need this function. Now what we can do is we can just copy everything and paste it inside our index.js, but in this way we have to copy paste this everywhere in every file we create. But as we are working with React, let's make this another component and use it as export. So here I'll create another folder and I'll call this just helpers. You can call this anything you want, and inside this I'll create a new file and I'll call this SQLite database. You can call this again anything you want, and this will be .js or JSX, whatever you want. So here I'll paste all the code, but here we will define export default async function. So this OpenDB function also can open a database for us. Now here we have to change the path also, because we have to tell the SQLite where it can find that database. Otherwise it will create a new one. So that's why I'll say /block.db, which means it should go inside our root or main directory and search for block.db, like that. Now we can save this, and we got our OpenDB function available for us for any file we want to use. Now let's close this. So now here inside this index.js we can import all the necessary files. So first of all, we import our OpenDB which we have created. So import OpenDB, and this should come from, and this is inside the helpers folder. So I'll go out of all the categories, all the folders here, and get inside my helpers, and here we got the SQLite database. So we'll import the OpenDB from there, like that. And then we need to import the SQLite. So for SQLite we don't import, but here we can say SQLite is equal to, it should require, so require what, and we need SQLite or SQLite tree, but here we need the SQLite tree, just like that. You can say also here SQLite tree, and then we need our normal function here. So I'll say export default, and then I'll call this function also async. So everything what we will use will be async. So export default async function, and we will call this get categories. So just like that, categories. So this way we will get all our category data. And then here we need two parameters. One is request, so it's the request of the user, and then according to that request we will give them a response, so like that. And then inside this we defined what should happen if the user sends us a request. So the request will run as a user tries to reach our post. For example, this link here, if they run this one here, it will just go ahead and run our function. So as you see, we are getting an error because this function is not done yet. So according to that request, we will give a response to them. And by now, we don't have any response, so that's why we are getting the error. So first of all, let's fetch all the categories data. So for this, we'll do just like before. We will also proof everything, but for now, let's go ahead and just do it as normal. So I'll say const, and here I'll say all categories, or you can say all cats, whatever you want. So here, as it's async, so we need await also, and then here we need our database. So now to use that open database, we have to create a const table for this. So I'll say const, and again we call this db. So now this will be equal to await, as our function is async, and it will be OpenDB. So it will be just the clone of our OpenDB. So like that, and then we got our await here. So we can say db and then dot, and then we can use one of these functions. Now here we need all, so we get all the categories. So that's why all, and here we can type our statement as before. So I'll say here select all from, and then we need the table name, which is the category. So like this, and we'll fetch everything from there. And then, as I said, we have to give a response for this request. So I'll say response.json. So all our response will be in JSON format, and here we will give the all categories const inside this. So it will just give this response whatever comes from here. Now at the moment we got no data here, so we make it an empty array. So here I'll save this one, and now let's go ahead and run this again. So let's see what happens. So now here it says no such table. So let's see what we did wrong. Now as you see here, we got one new database, which means the SQLite was not able to find this database here. So it means we have some mistake in the path here. So let's go inside our file and see what's wrong. Now as you see, I put 2 dots here, which is wrong. I need just 1 dot here to search for this database here. Now let's delete this one. We don't need this. So, and now let's save this. And if we refresh here, it will rerun that function. So it should work now. Now as you see, we got no error, which means everything is working for us. But at the moment we got no data. So let's go ahead and create the insert function also. I'm sorry, not function, but the select or the insert statement we need here now. So now here, before writing our insert statement, we have to check what kind of request method we are getting. So if the request method is get, it should return this statement. But if the request method is post, which is for insert or saving data, that way it should return another statement. So for this, we just need some if else statement. So here I'll say if request. Now as I said, our users will request something. So the request can be a submitting of a form, or it can be just asking for some data. So if they ask the data, like what we are doing for now, like these categories, so the method will be get. But if they want to submit a form, the request method will be post. So that's why now here I'll say request dot method. So if the request method is equal to, and then we type the request method name. If it is get, then in that way it should return this statement here. So it should return this JSON data. Now here else, we can say else, then we will give it some post data. But as we will also update the data, so let's use the else if statement. So here I'll say else if, and then I'll say request dot method is equal to post, and then we can define our statement, and then after that we will say else. We can say here, for example, response dot JSON, and now instead of any kind of JSON data, we will just type no data found. So like that. Now let's go ahead and see how to create the insert statement. So now for this also we need one const table. So I'll say const, and we call this create category, or you can say create data, but I want to specify the name so you understand everything better. So here create category, and we need again await, and then we need our database, because this way we can search inside our table. So database dot, but this time we are not fetching all the data. This time we are sending a statement. So we use the prepare function of SQLite. So it should prepare something for us. Now what should it prepare? We can define here. Now here inside as a string we can say insert. So I'll say insert. Now it is just MySQL or SQL you are using usually. Insert into category. So this way we insert the data inside a table using SQL. So here we need to specify all the column names inside our table. So if we go back here, now as you see inside the category, we got the cat ID, we got category name, and we got created at. So we have to use all these names also inside our statement. But for category ID, we have used the auto increment inside our migrations. So if we go back here, as you see, it's auto increment. So we don't need to use that also. So instead of this, first of all, we are using the category name. So category underscore name, and then we can put a comma and use the next column. But if we go back here, as you see, the next column is also default of date of now, which is just fine for us. So let's go ahead and do it like that. So I leave it as it is, and we don't need another column here. So we have to close this, and then we will be using the values. Insert into category, we need values, but here we got some problem because we are not closing this one here. So like that, and here we have to use the opposite of that, because otherwise we will get error. So you can use one of them. You can use this for opening or the other one, just like that. And then we will use the values. So we will say insert into category in the column of name. Then we have to define a value for that. So we'll say values. We want to insert some values here, but here I put just a question mark. If we would have more columns, so for each column I would put one more question mark like that, because later on we will define the values for these question marks. So the first value will be for this column. So if we got one more column here, for example created date, so the second question mark will be for that. So we will be using this a lot, so don't worry for now. So now I'll just put one of them because we just need the name, and then after this we have to use some try and catch to see if we get some error. So let's open the try and catch, and then here we will use some statement again. So here I'll say const. Now we will put everything inside something or some name of response, for example. So here it will be await as it's async, and we will be using this constable from here, which is create category. We will be using that because we want to insert the data inside this table column using this question mark. So here dot run, and inside this run we specify which data should be inserted inside this question mark. So the first data will be just for this question mark. Now here I'll say test category. So we get some data here, but later on we will use everything dynamic. So for now I'll just leave it like that. And then after this we will be using again await, and I'll say response. So we get this one from here, and I'll say response dot finalize. So we will finalize our SQLite statement. So it will finalize everything for us. But if there's any kind of error, then it should say response.json. So it will give us some error, and here we will get the error first. So like that, and then we will say, for example, no data is inserted. So like that. So now let's try everything. Now for this I'll go back here. Now here if we run everything, it doesn't matter because we don't get any data, because this way we are sending a request.get method. So get method is just here, which selects all the data from the category. So we got no data, that's why we can't see anything. Now to check our insert data, we don't have any form yet, so let's go ahead and use the Postman for this. So I'll open Postman here, and here we need our URL link or API URL link, so which is this one here. Now I'll copy this one and go back to Postman and paste it here. Now here you can choose which method should it be, and here I'll say it's post. Now as we got no data, so that's why I'm not going to give some data inside the body, but I'll just send it like that. Now as you see, we got an empty object, which means the data has been created. So let's check it out. We can check this if we use this method of get on that API link. So as you see, we got one new category with the ID of 1, the category name, and also the date of today. So which is created using SQLite. So now let's go ahead also check this inside the browser. So now if we enter this again, now as you see, we got return a new data. So let's create some more data here. For example, here, so this is test category. Let's say test category 2, save it, and if we go inside Postman and run the post request method again, we'll get those curly braces, which means everything is working. Now if we search again in the same URL, so as you see, we got one new category name, which is category of 2. Perfect. Now everything is working as we want, but for our post, we don't want to type the data all the time here inside the VS Code. But instead of this, we want to get the data from our users. So let's see how to do this. For this, instead of this string here, I'll just say request. So whatever the user requests, go inside the body of that request and then search for the category name, or search if you find a field with the name of category name, then take the data from that. So I'll say category name. If there's any field with the name of category name and got some data, so it will be inserted inside our column in the table of category. So let's save this. Now if we go back here inside Postman and if we try to post something, you will see we get an error, SQLite constraint. So it means the data is not nullable, so the data shouldn't be null, but we are trying to send some null data, and also it's not finding that field name. Now to send the field name using the Postman, what we can do is we can see here raw, and then if we go ahead and get the data, as you see, we got every data like this. So it's a JSON format. We can copy this one. We don't need the created at because it will just generate from SQLite, and also the category ID is auto increment, so we don't need this. Now here we don't need a comma, so here we can define one new data, which for example comes from the form of our user. So now here I'll say from, so let's say category from Postman, so that we can see everything. Now if we just post this like that, send, as you see we got our curly braces, which means it is working. So let's check it. So now if I change the method to get, it will go to our script. So it will just come here inside this index.js. It will search if the request is get, then it will run this SQL statement, which is select all from category. Now let's go ahead and say send. Now we got category 1 and 2, which we have created statically, but we got one new category of 3 with the name as we created here. So which means if now we use any kind of form inside our blog, we can post the data and also we can fetch the data here. Great. Now you can see that easy it is to create API using Next.js. And that's why I like Next.js a lot. So as we got our get method and our post method, we need the put method also. What put method does, it just updates the data for us. So we get the data, post the data, so we inserted the data, but also we need to put the data or patch the data. You can use put or patch, they're almost the same thing, but with different names. So for me, put makes more sense, so I'll just use the put. So let's go ahead and see how to do this. Now, as I said, here we got else if statement and else, so that's why we can use one more else if. So I'll just copy everything from here because everything will be almost similar to that. So here we don't need the else. Instead of this, we will say else. We don't need this curly brace here. So again, else if the method is this time put. So if the method is put, it should do something new for us. So here I'll say const update category. Now instead of create, we will update. So let's call this also update category. And then we need the same thing. It should prepare a statement for us. Now here, instead of inserting, what we can do in SQL, you know that we are updating the data. So we will say update category. You can type everything in capital letter, so that's better. Update category, and then we will say set. So it should set the data to something. To what? We need this column here. We don't need this parentheses anymore. So let's remove them, and also these two here, let's remove them. So we say update the category table and set the category name to something. So in here, to what is equal to something. For example, here I'll say test. I'll just test it for now. Now if I would run this query like this, what it does, it just go ahead and update all of our category names with the name of test. So that's why, remember, anytime you use MySQL, SQL, or any kind of query, you have to specify where should it update. So you have to define the category ID, or you have to give this where, so it find that particular column for you. For example, here I'll say cat underscore ID is equal to 1. So it should go ahead and just update the category of 1 and not the category 2 and 3. Like that, we can do this. But as above, we need here question mark instead of this text. So the first thing which we'll define here, it will be just for this first question mark, and the second question mark will be our category ID. So I'll just put another question mark here. Then we will say create category. Now instead of create category, we are using update category. So update category, then we need the same function. It should run something. It runs request.body.name, or we can use just some static text again. So here I'll say it should be test updated, for example, and then for the category ID, I'll define the category ID of 1. So, and then it will just finalize everything, and if it is not done, it should say no data is updated, and we get some error. So let's go ahead and check if everything is working. For this, I'll come back here, and instead of this get, we will use the put here. So put, and I'll say just send. Now let's remove this data from here so it doesn't confuse you. So I'll say send. Now as you see, if it's working, that's why we are getting these curly braces. So let's see if we get that, and as you see, we got everything done. It is test updated. So we have successfully updated everything, but still it's again static. So how should we take the data from the user? It's just the same way like here. So we'll get from the request inside the body and then category underscore name. And also now we need that category ID. So here we will say cat underscore. So it will search for these two fields. So the first one will be this one for this question mark, and the second one will be for our category ID. So here we should say request dot body dot cat underscore ID, like that. Now if we save this like this, it should work as we want. So now let's see if it's working. So now here we'll just go ahead and paste that category name JSON, and I'll say category from Postman, and I'll just call here updated so we can see the result better. And as I said, as second parameter we need the category ID also. So I'll be using just like that from here. Let me copy this, no comma, and here I'll say the category ID of, for example, we want to update the second or the third one. So let's update the third column. So here I say third, and then I'll just change the request method. So it will be put, and then I'll send it. So now let's get all the data. So again, I'll get the data, and the third one should be updated. As you see, it's updated. Let me change this. Update it again. So update it again, and I'll say it's put, send, working, get, and it's updated again. So our update statement is also ready. We are almost done for our category API. So now we can get the data, we can post the data, we can update the data, and what else we need? We need to delete the data. So let's see how to do this. For this, we'll come back here inside our script, and then we need one more else if. So now from here, instead of this put, we'll be using the delete. So here I'll say else if, and we need this again. So let's run this again, and here I'll say if the request method is this time delete. So I'll say here delete category instead of update. So delete, and let me copy this one and use it also here like that. And then now we need to just delete the data. So here we'll say delete. Now we have to define the delete statement. So here I'll say delete from where. It should delete from category, and then we need to define where should it update. Where category name is equal to question mark. That's what we don't need, because for delete it's enough for us if we get just this category ID is equal to delete. So if it finds any category ID with our JSON data, it should just delete this one. Normally we get this from the request. I'll show you that inside the post, but for now it's enough for here. So we'll get that, and here in request.body we also just need that request.body.category ID. So we will delete that category ID which has been given here. So here no data is deleted if we got some error, otherwise it will finalize the data for us. So let's save this. Now if we go to Postman and use this delete, and also here we have to give that category ID, so like that. And again, normally what we do is we just put a slash here and we get that category ID from there, and this will come from request. We will do this way also, but for now let me demonstrate you this way also. So it's category of 1, so it should delete the first category for us. So let's send this, but as you see we got some error here because I'm using some ID and it's not finding it. So let's run it again, and now it's saying no error. So let's see if it is done also. Now as you see we got the category of 2 and 3, but the category of 1 is gone. The same way if I send the category of 2, or let me choose the 3, and if I say gets no problem. So let's delete it. And if I delete it, and again if we get it, so as you see we got this category of 2 just here. Now if I go back here and try to fetch the data from here also, now as you see here also we got just the category of ID 2. So now as you see, we are done. We have created a CRUD API for our Next.js. Now it is done inside our category table, but you can do the same thing just for the post table also. We will go ahead here and create a new folder, and we call this post, like that. Post folder already exists. Oh, we have already created that. So inside this, we'll create a new file, and I'll call this index.js, like that. And now inside this index.js, we need almost everything from here. So let's just copy them because we don't want to waste our time. So of course we need some major changes also. So first of all, we need our database. We need SQLite tree. Actually, we don't need the SQLite tree here. We are not using that. So let's remove this actually. So here we are using everything as from our category. So here, let's say here it should be get posts. So get post, and then we will get the database the same way as before. We get the DB. So this is OpenDB. It will just find the database for us. And then we say if the request method is get. So if the user just want to see our post, for this we will say all posts and run a new statement here. It will be select all from. This time we will select everything from our post table, and then we will return this also here as JSON. So let's use this here and then save it. Now let's check this if it's working. So for this, I'll go here. Now instead of this category here, we are using post like this. Now for beginners, let me review this. So inside our VS Code, we got one folder with the name of pages. This pages folder is already created for us from Next.js. And then inside this, we got another folder inside which we got all our APIs. Now this API folder is also created from Next.js. So you don't need to create it yourself. Unless if you delete this, then you can use it the same way. You can just come here and create that. And then inside that, we have created two folders. One with the name of category, and inside this I have created the index.js. So if someone just go in the browser and types API, so API is our first folder here. So you see here this API, and then category or the post, the Next.js will run this file here, and inside that file then we have defined all our SQL statements using the SQLite. So let's see everything here. Now we have imported the OpenDB, which comes from our helpers. So I have created a function here. Now this function, what it does, it just go ahead and finds this or search this block database. If it find it out, it will just open that for us. So inside that database, we got two tables. The first one is the category, and the second one is the post table. So it's also here. So we got two category table and post table. Inside that post table and category table, then we can just insert the data or we can fetch the data from them. So I hope this has cleared everything for you. Now let's go ahead and see what's happening here. Now here I'll say if the request method is equal to get. Now to fetch the data or to show the data, like here, for example, if I go here and type category, now you see this data here. Then you will say else if the request method is equal to post. So which means if the user sends the data using our form from our blog, so this method will be post, because that way no one can manipulate the data. So if this is a method of post, then it should run this new function, this new statement here. So here instead of create category, now as we are inside the post table, so we'll say create post. You can call this anything you want. The name here doesn't matter, but you have to use the same name here when you run that. So inside that, we'll say await, as our function is async. So I mean this function. Now as you see, it is async function. So if you use async function, you must use also the await. Otherwise, you will get some error. So await, and then I'll say db, which means this open db. Yeah, we are cloning that here. And then we got some functions which are coming from SQLite. And here we'll say prepare. Here we got all the data, but here we prepare a statement. So as we want to save the data here, we are inserting the data. So we'll say insert into category. So insert in my category table. But for now, as we are using for post, so I'll say insert into my post table. What should insert? And here we need some more fields, because if we go back to our table here of post, you can see here we got too many columns. The post ID we don't need because it's auto increment. Then we need title, we need slug, we need image URL, we need excerpt, content, author, featured, and also we need the category ID or category name, because that way we can make our relationship also. So let's go ahead and see how to do everything here. Now, as we have written everything inside our schema, so let's just copy paste everything from here. Now we got all from here, so let's just copy them. So it will make our code easier. So it will save us some time. So I'll just paste them here. And then insert post ID. We don't need, it's auto increment. Then we'll set title. So title. And then we need the slug. So we need the slug here like that, but we got something wrong. Okay, here we don't need these things here. We just type them like title and slug. So like this. And then I need the image URL. So slug here. Then excerpt. It's also here. Then we need the content. So content, author, like that. So as you see, I'm specifying all the columns here. Then we got the featured after author. We need this one here, and then comma. So here we need created at, and we need the category name. So that's the last one, because the created date will be generated automatically. So I remove everything from here because we don't need them anymore here. And now we are done for the first part. Now here, as many columns we got, we have to put the same amount of question mark and values. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. We need also the category name here. So 8. We need 8 columns. So that's why 8 question marks here. So 1, 2, let me copy this. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8 question marks, and let me save this like that. And then we will use everything from here. Now we can use this, for example, to type something static. I could just type something statically, some dummy code, but instead of this, for now, to save the time, let's go ahead and take everything from request.body, so we get everything as ready, because the examples we have already tried inside the category. So now here I'll say request.body. Here we need the title, so the first one. If it finds something from the title, so it should just save that one. The same way we need for slug. So let me copy this one. Here I'll say it's a slug, and then we need the second thing, which is image URL. So like that, and we need excerpt, and then we need content, and we need also author. We need the featured, so like this, and also at the end we need the category underscore name. So we'll remove this one from here. Now we got everything as we want. Then of course we can run this and then finalize that. So no data is inserted. We can say no post data is inserted. So like that. And now if we post some data, we should see the result. Now let's go ahead and check if everything is working. For this, again, we go to Postman, and here we will type post because we want to get everything from post. Now we are getting some empty error here because our table is empty, but now we can type some data here. So first of all, we got all those columns here, so let's use them again. Now it's copy pasting all the time. It's not beautiful, but we have to do this. So let me do everything and I'll come back in a second. So I'm back here and I have done everything. So we got the content. I wrote content 1, author 1, and also for featured it can be 0 or 1, so because it's an integer. And also category name, I have chosen here the test, like that. Now we can send this data, so I'll post it and say send. Let me see if we get everything, but we got already some error here, so let's see what's wrong. Now let's go ahead to our statement. Oh, we are passing that image URL here and we are not using that. So if you don't want to use that image URL, you have to remove this from here and also from here and also from the question mark. Otherwise you will get that error. So let's define the image URL also. So for that, I'll just use this one from here. So I'll just copy this one like this, and then we have to define that image URL also. So it will be our third one or fourth one. So let's see which one was that. It's just the third one. So let's go ahead inside the Postman, and here after the post slug we got the image URL. So image URL like that, and we have to define a URL here, so comma, and let's remove this from here like that, and let's try it again. And as you see, we got one more error. So let's see what else is not correct. Create post, title, excerpt, response to it. Oh, we have to change these names here also. That was the reason. So let's save this, and hopefully this time works. And again we got one error. Sorry for that, guys. So SQL is like that. If you pass something different or slightly differences, then you get those errors. So often I get problem from these question marks. So let's see if it's 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, we have one more extra comma here, and I think that's the problem. So let's save this, and if you go back, and let's now try this one. So if I send this, oh, and now we got this SQLite constraint, which means the data is already created and we are having 2 slugs with the same name, which is a unique field. And if you got a unique field twice, you will get this error code of SQLite constraint. So it means our script is already run before for us. So let's see if it is like that. Now if I get the data, now as you see, we got our first post here. Now here, let me make some changes to show you the difference. Now I'll say it's post 2, and the others are not unique, so that's why it doesn't matter. So let's post this again. Now as you see, we got our JSON object, which means everything is working. Now let's get this again. And we got our second post also here. Perfect. Now we are done with the inserting and also getting the post data also. So now let me show you one new thing which could make some headache for us. For example, if we go here, so if we go back here, now as you see, we got this title. Now if we want to use this title in our form, so imagine this would be our form. For that, we have to create that slug also. And if I paste this like that, then here we have to put hyphen, and then again, and then again. For each word, we have to put one new minus or one new hyphen here. So that will create headache for us. Now to solve this problem, we need to install the Slugify. Now Slugify will do the job for us. What we could do is we could do this also using JavaScript, but already there's one package, so let me show you how to use that also. So here I'll come back here and just cancel my server, and inside this I'll say npm it should install for me the Slugify. So it will be just Slugify and enter. Now it's already installed, so let me use this. Now here I'll say import Slugify. So Slugify from Slugify. So Slugify again, and then we can use it here for our slug. So how we use this? It's just easy. The column you want to use, you will just put this inside some parentheses, and then you can use this like that. You will say your column name request.body.slug. So still we are passing that body request to our slug here. So, and then here I'll say it should be equal to, then we need Slugify here, and inside that Slugify we will enter the column which we want to Slugify, or the column in which we want to add all those hyphens. So for us it is this request.body.title. So let me put this here. So we want to Slugify this title. Now if we done this, we need our comma here and we save it. Now if we go back to our Postman, we don't need the slug anymore. So here I'll just copy everything from here. Let's exit and remove that, and now we will use a long title here. So I'll say here long title for testing, for example. Now as you see, we got no hyphen here, so let me send this just like that. Send it, and we got some error. Okay, that's not a problem. Let's go ahead and post it. So we are not getting the data. Oh, I forgot to rerun our server here. So npm run dev. Now let's go back, and now our server should be there. So I'll try it again. Send. Now as you see, we got no error. And here, if I get this, now as we go down inside our third one, so now as you see, everything is done for us. We don't need to take care of all those hyphens here, and we don't need to repeat the title again for slug. So it just takes the title and creates the slug for us. Isn't that great? I think it is. So now as we are done with the post method, let's go ahead and take care of the update method also. For that, we'll go back to VS Code, and here we need to use the update. So else if the request method is equal to put, then it should update this time the post. Update post, and don't forget to use this also here. And then we'll say update post table and set. Then we need all those values from here. So we'll be using all these from here. So now let's go ahead, copy them from here again. So now I'll go ahead and update set where name is equal to blah blah, and then we need all these. So set, now we can use is equal to and the question mark. So the first field will be title, second field will be slug, third image, excerpt, then content, then we got author, and we got our featured, and then at the end the category name. So if we change that category, then here we will say where the post ID is equal to post ID which user is using. So this way we will get that everything from the request body. So let's go ahead and take this also from here and put it just down here. Now here also we will slugify that title, so we don't need to manually put the slug also, because if the user update this one, it will just go ahead and update the slug for us also. Now it's also done. So now here you will say no post data is updated, like this, if there's an error. Otherwise it should just do the job for us. So let's go ahead and update something. Now we'll go to Postman and I'll copy everything from here or just from here, so we get the ID also, and then paste it here. So don't forget to update the API to post. And now here I'll say it's not post but update, and at the end we are passing the post ID, so we have to put this also in the end. We are getting everything here. Oh, we don't need all those data, we just need one of them. So let's just use this one and the rest will be removed like that. And here we will say the post ID. So let's go ahead and put this here for the post ID like that, and we don't need the comma at the end. So everything is great. Now let's type here updated, and I'll be using this also here, and we will update the post ID of 1 here. So let's send this and see the result. Now as you see, we got the status of okay. Now let's see if we updated this. Now as you see, we got no success. So let's see what's wrong here. So here we update post, and then we're cutting post ID is equal to that. So we got that. And we need the post ID here also. We are getting the category name, but we haven't defined any post ID. So let's go ahead and copy this one from here. And here we will say that it's coming also from request. So request.body.post ID, like that. We'll save this and then we will rerun everything. So we'll put that and it's updated. Great. So it's done and get. So as you see, we got the updated now because the ID is here. Now the other posts are the same as before. But now if I go ahead and use the ID of 2, and if I use the put here, so and send this, now as you see, we get SQL constraint, as I said, if the post with the same name already exists. So it doesn't take, because we have said that the slug should be unique and also the title. So now here we'll say it's 2, so it will create a new slug for us. And as we are creating the slug, so we don't need this field here anymore. So let's go ahead, and as you see, it's done. Now if we see our post, now as you see, we got post 1 updated 2 updated 2. So everything is just from the post 1, and we have successfully updated everything. Now here, for example, we could also update the category name. So let's update just the category. Now here we will say it's also test, and I'll say here it is just test 1. Now let's use the put. So set. Now it's working. Now if we get ahead, and you will see that we got test 1 category here. So we can update everything accordingly. So with that being said, we are now done with the update also. So now we can get the data, we can post the data, and we can update the data. What else we need? Of course, just as always, we need the delete. And also remember, we want to use the details page also. So if a user clicks on a post, it should see that particular details about that post. How we do this? Now let's go ahead and take care of that also. So let's go back to VS Code. Now here inside this post, now let me first close everything from here. So close all. So here inside our post API folder, here we'll create another file. So here now to fetch the data in Next.js by using its ID, we'll create the file also with a special naming convention. So it means I'm using here the square brackets, and inside this I'll pass ID or any name of your choice. So you can say it's post ID or any name you want. You can use this. The name doesn't matter, but later on you have to use the same name. So then we will close this, and then we will say that is .js. So now let me show you the live example of this. Now here, if we go back to Firefox, now as you see here, we got all the posts from the API. But here, if I click in a post, it just redirects me to the details page of that post. And if you see here, we get everything by its slug. So we are fetching the data using its slug and showing that for our users. The same way, we can use everything as post ID or slug or whatever we call this. So if we put a file name in square brackets, the Next.js will apply whatever we write after our path of posts or category, whatever we pass here, it will just copy that and bring this here. So we can run some queries using this ID or this slug from here. So now let's go ahead and do everything here. Now for this, we will need all those imports. So we need these two. So let's just copy them. I'll copy this to here. And then we need a new function. So just like this function here. That's why I'm just copying this. Now let's go ahead and close this. And then inside this, we run the same way our methods. So here we will run one more query of get and filter the data according to its slug or to its ID. So let's see what I mean. Now here, as we got everything, so we need our database also. So I'll just copy this one from here. So we don't need to type this. And as we got this one also, we need everything from here also. So if the method is blah blah, so we can use just this get method from here. So I'll just use this up to this else-if. So I'll just paste it here and we'll remove this else-if and I'll put here just else res.json and then we will say method not supported. So if there's any other methods like deleting or like post, so it will say method not supported to the user, and this way we will avoid some problems. So now for now, let's go ahead and see what we are doing here. Now here I'll say if the method is get, then we get all the posts. But now we will do one more thing here. So I'll say take all the posts or take one post. So here let's just remove this name of all posts. Instead of this, I'll say fetch the post by ID. For example, you can call it anything you want. It's equal to. Now here we need a little bit difference. Now here we will say select all from post, but we define the where also. Now here we will say where the slug, or you can use the ID, whatever you like, is equal to the question mark. So it will be equal to the question mark. So here we say select all from the post table where the slug is equal to a question mark. Now what is this question mark? So in response of that question mark, we'll put a comma here. Now it's different. And we need the square brackets again, so like this, and inside that we will say request dot body dot, and then we need just this name because this name is what we get from our URI. So here I'll say post ID like that. So whatever we paste here or whatever we use here, it will just take that and bring this as this parameter here for us. So that way, which means if we got any slug which is just the same as here, for example the slug of this one, then it will just bring us those data. It's just something we use in SQL. So if we type some wrong data, for example ID of 1 or 2, we don't get anything here because we are not using or we are not fetching data by its ID. We could do this also if we go ahead and say that the post ID is equal to question mark, and this will work the same way. For now, let's use slug, and then we'll be using the ID also. Now let's check this. Now for this, we got post ID and we have to return that. So response.json will be post by ID. Now as it's a get, so it will just run this query here for us. So now let's go ahead and test if everything is working. For this, we'll go back to the Postman, and here I have changed the local host to 3001 because we are running two projects here. So for the first one, I'm using 3000. So that's why for the current one, I'm using 3001. So if we send this, as you see, we get all those data from here. Now, if I go ahead and put a slug, so for example, this one, I'll just copy it and paste it just here. So if I use this one, you will see we got an empty array. So it means we are fetching the data, but it wasn't able to find this post for us. So let's see what is wrong here. Now if we go back, as you see, we got db.all. Oh, we don't need the all function because now we are fetching just one particular post. So that's why we'll be using the get function, because this way it will just return one post for us. Otherwise, it will try to post all the data. So let's save this, and if you go back, let me try this again, and again it seems like we haven't done everything right. So let's go back and see what's wrong again. So here I did a mistake. I'm using request.body.postID, but inside our request body there is nothing, because this time we are fetching the data just by its parameter in the header. So let's go ahead and find out this one. To find this one, we'll go to VS Code, and here instead of this body we'll be using query. So this way now the Next.js will give us that ID from the browser. So let's go ahead and try it again. So for now, let's save it, and if we go back here and I'll say just send, and as you see, we got our first post. Now let me remove this and see the second name and copy that one here. So for now, let me remove that, and as you see, we got many posts here. So let's use this one. So I'll be using the slug of this one here. I'll just copy it and paste it here, and then try to fetch that data. Now as you see, we got just one data, and this is the long title for testing. Now the same way as I said, we can use the post ID if we change our query here. Now here we could say, instead of slug, then we would say post underscore ID is equal to question mark. Now if we save this, and if we come back to Postman and try to fetch the data, as you see, we got nothing because there's no match for this ID. But if I put 1 here and try to search for that, now we got again this error because I just removed that post from here. Now let's add the post again, and then 1. Now as you see, we got our first ID, and if I use the second, so you'll see we got our second post, and the same way we got our third post here. So this is your choice, how you want it. For new modern blogs or websites, you will see all the time slug, but you can still use it this way if you want so. But for this project also I'm going to use the slug, so that's why I'll say here if the slug is equal to the request query ID, then show them the details. In this way we will also fetch all those data like that. Now let's save this, and also the same method we will be using to update the data, because otherwise our users must manually type the slug also and then update that. Otherwise it won't work. And if we don't do this like that, then we have to hide that slug field which we are using inside our form. But that's not a good way of doing that. The best way is just to query the URL or send the form to a specific URL, and that way we will get the ID also. So let's do this here also the same way. Now for this, I'll just update everything from the put because we'll be using the update. So we'll be using until here, and just copy this one. And now instead of this post, we'll be using that just here like that. But now here there will be also some difference, and that is where the post ID. So here it doesn't matter if you're using post ID or slug because our users will not see that. So let's go ahead, and here instead of the body, because we are not passing this inside the body, we'll be using the query ID just as we did here. So request.query.post ID. So now this post ID is this one here. So anything we type here, the Next.js copy this and bring this to that name, and then using the query we can use that data. So as everything is done here, so let's go ahead and try it out. Now here if I go to Postman again, so here now we can update this post here. So for this, for example, I'll say new category here. So we see the result, new category name, and also here we have to put that particular ID which we want to update. So now we are using the ID, that's why I'll put here 1 just like that, and then the method should be put. So let's send this. Now it seems like it's working, so let's see if everything is updated, but we have to use the normal API like that, and it is not updated. So let's see the mistake here. Now as you see here, I have used the post ID like my column name here, but that's what we are not using. We are using this ID because this is coming from query. So that's why this naming convention is here important, to use just the same thing as here for your query. So here we'll say post and ID just like here, and then we save it. And if we go back and let me try to update this again, so it will be put, and I'll say this is post 1. So new category name should be there. So let's just type this one also here, or we should remove the slug, we don't need this. So let's send this and then get it back from here. Now as you see, we got our post 1 new and the same slug and also this category, and the rest are the same as before. We can do the same thing for others. For example, for our second post, so post 2, and here we will say it is just post 2, and then I'll say post 2 here like that, and then we need the put, send it, it's done, get, and we're not getting that like this, so like that. And the second one, as you see, we got new 2 as here, and also post 2. So we have successfully updated the data just by using its URI or using the ID from our API URL here. Great. Now the same thing we need to do for the delete also. So let's go ahead and do that also. Now here we don't get any delete, or we have one, so let's use it. So let me copy everything from here, and then we'll be using that just from this else here. So paste it here, and now it's looking good. So if the method is delete, then it will delete category, but here we'll say delete post like that, and we'll be using this here also. But here there will be just one difference. As I said before, delete from category where category ID, but here we will delete from post. So post, and we need post underscore ID here. So post underscore ID, and then as we did for the get, we'll be using here also comma, and then we need our square brackets, and inside this we will pass our request. So request and dot query dot post ID. So not that ID, just like here. So this way it will just delete this for us. So here now we don't need this try catch. So let's remove that, and also we won't be using this delete post. So we can just do everything directly. So now this is also one way of directly deleting the data. We could use the try and catch system, but also we can just run our query like this. But here I'll say .get, and then it should just delete that. And also here we can confirm if everything is working for us. So here I'll say response.json. So after everything is done, it should return a JSON response for us also. So here I'll say it should say just that deleted successfully, just like that. Save it, and if we go back, so now let's remove the post number 2 from here. So I'll just remove that, and if I say delete, so like that, and here I run this one, as you see it says deleted successfully. Now let's get that data. So we are getting everything by a slug, so this way it won't work. So let's fetch all the data. Now as you see, we got the ID of 3 directly and 4, but we don't get the ID of 2. Now let's delete these 2 also, and here I say 3. Now delete this one, it's remove. Let's remove the 4th one also. Done. Now let's get the data. So now as you see, we got an empty array, so it means we are successfully deleting the data also. Now let's create one new data. So we use this one from here. Let's send this. Now it's created. Get, it should be post 5, like that. So now as you see guys, this easy it is to create the CRUD functionality with Next.js. And once you have done from one of your table, then you can copy paste everything, and everything will work just the way you want. So that's it guys. For this part, we have created a CRUD API for our blog, and everything is working. And in the next part, I'm going to show you how to use this data inside our UI, and also how to submit the forms instead of using something like Postman. And also we will update, delete, create, of course everything will be done using our own forms. So for now, if you like the video, please press the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe the channel. With that being said, see you in the next part.